Alrighty, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Nate. I also go by Hockey Boy Nate, and today we are going to be giving out the latest information as to what potential Tropical Cyclone 6 will be doing, as well as whether or not it will intensify into Tropical Storm Fred, which is most likely going to be the case here, and where it will impact. So if you guys are new to my channel, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, turn on notifications, share this with friends and family and on social media. Also follow me on social media. Link will be in the description down below. I do want to give out a disclaimer. I am not home at the moment, so I do not have the best of equipment to get you guys this information. So if the video is kind of jittery and stuff like that, please try and interpret what my words are saying instead and try to infer based off of that. Anyways, here is potential Cyclone 6 on your screen. This is the satellite infrared imagery. The brighter colors indicate stronger thunderstorms, colder temperatures up in the upper parts of the atmosphere with the strong thunderstorms that are quite robust, quite large. So the higher and higher they go up in the sky, obviously the tops of the clouds will get colder and colder. So seeing those red areas right towards the center part of your screen, that indicates some very strong thunderstorms, very strong, robust convection that is ongoing right within that area. Not exactly the most organized thing that I have ever seen in my entire life, but this thing does look like a general tropical cyclone. You can see these little bands on the southern side here, the southeastern side. You can see on the northern side, this band swirling in. And so it's definitely ingesting a lot of moisture within the center area of low pressure, which would be right in the middle of those bands, right at that L. Stands for low pressure for the most part. So that's really good to see. You also have some decent ventilation. You can see these little feathers that are coming off from the sides of the tropical system. So whenever you see that, that tells you that this thing is definitely inputting energy and then outputting the rest of it, the remains of that energy as ventilation. So whenever you see that, that is a good sign for this tropical system to be doing rather well for itself. Now, if we take a look at the latest advisory on this thing, as of 5 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time, this thing does have a maximum sustained wind of 35 miles per hour, so it would be a tropical depression if it was organized enough for it to do so. Minimum pressure of 1,012 millibars, so it's not exactly the lowest pressure I've ever seen either. It definitely is in infancy as of right now, but if we take a look at the forecast cone for this is the cone of uncertainty. So one thing I do want to mention is that anywhere within this cone right here, outlined with this black marker that you're about to see here in a second, if my computer lags to ever-living glory, within that giant cone right there, that's where the center of low pressure could go over. It's not the specific areas in the middle where you see the black S's and the black D's all the way throughout all those circles. That's not the area to which it will most likely be. Anywhere within that cone, that's where this thing could potentially make landfall, and I'll go into a little bit of that later on in a bit. But you can see here, this will head on through Hispaniola with Haiti and the Dominican Republic, most likely on Wednesday evening, heading off into the Bahamas and Cuba at around the Thursday evening into the Friday morning hours, and then by Friday evening, late Friday evening into Saturday morning, that's when it could be knocking on the doorstep of the Keys, as well as areas near Miami and maybe further north of that towards Lauderdale. If it does end up heading west out into the Gulf of Mexico, then potentially areas further about on the western portions of the peninsula could be getting impacted by some of the outer bands on the northeastern side of the storm, and there could potentially be a tornado threat all the way throughout even the entire peninsula. So really something that we're going to have to watch out for. I most likely will be giving out a live stream on Saturday evening. It'll most likely be at around 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. That's when I will actually be back at my house. And so if you guys are excited for that, please stay tuned for all the latest information within the general vicinity. So as a big thing right here is Saturday evening, Saturday morning, that general vicinity on Saturday is when this thing could potentially be moving on through the Keys. So stay tuned for all of that as well. Let's take a look at the Ascat satellite imagery here. All of these little different colors of these little flags, if you will. This basically tells us as to the winds at the surface of this tropical system. So if I actually zoom out a little bit more, there you go. At the bottom of your screen, you can see all these little numbers and these little color codes, and that basically tells us the strength of the winds at the surface of this tropical system. It can also tell us the direction of the winds as to this tropical system. So really interesting to see all these blues over here. This is the 10 knot winds at the surface, which is about 15 miles per hour. That'll continue all the way up. 40 is in pink, but you don't see a whole lot of 40s. You see a little bit of this light pink down here. You see a little bit of this red, which would be 30 knots. And if we zoom in right up here into the Leeward Islands, you can see there is a little bit of a red flag right there that tells us that there is 30 knot winds moving from the east heading off to the west in an anticyclonic pattern. So decently strong winds there, 30 knot winds, 35 mile per hour winds at the surface, according to the satellite imagery. Not exactly the strongest thing in the world, so that's the reason why the National Hurricane Center still has it as a 35 mile per hour invest. Another thing that I do want to mention here real quickly is that the direction of all the winds and how they're moving, if you wanted a well-organized tropical system, you would want all of this to be circulating within one general area. But the thing of it is that you have two areas that are not exactly, one confined circle. You have one circle right here, you have another one right here. And that basically tells us that there is two displaced areas of circulation, maybe one not exactly as intensified as another, but the one thing that I am looking for to most likely be dominant is this northern area of circulation that will most likely form just to the south of Puerto Rico and even eventually head off and towards that general vicinity, as well as the Dominican Republic and Haiti. So really interesting to see from the satellite imagery on that. The one thing that I do want to mention here real quickly is that the hurricane hunters actually are pretty active here today. They have sent two aircraft reconnaissance missions out into this invest, one of which didn't really tell us a whole lot. You can see that the NOAA 3 aircraft reconnaissance plane has already finished, and it is head back to its airport, to which it will station and most likely go out again either later tonight or tomorrow morning. But its track, you can see within those little colors again, that's the track of the tropical system and how it went about just trying to figure out what the surface winds of this actually was, as well as if there is a well-defined low pressure system within that storm. I won't get into too much detail of that, but just know that one mission has been finished, another one which is currently on the way, so we'll get more information as to what this tropical system will be doing within the next 6 hours. Now, the one thing that I do want to mention here real quickly, before we get into the official tracks from the model guidance, I do want to take a look at the intensity guidance here from the multiple models. And most of these actually have this becoming a relatively high tropical storm within the next 120 hours, maybe a little bit past that. But there are a couple models that say that it could even get higher than that. There's even one that says within the next 4 days, 5 days, something like that, there could potentially be a hurricane, a Category 1 hurricane that could make landfall somewhere, most likely in Florida, due to the fact that this thing does decrease in velocities rather significantly. So I would have to determine that something at the sort of land and friction would bring that wind speed down like it is. So really interesting to see from that model. Of course, there's a couple other models that say it could get up towards Category 1 again, maybe even another one that goes all the way up to Category 4. I believe that is highly unlikely at this point, although it's not exactly, out of the question per se. I just think that it is a very, very, very low chance, almost zero in my opinion, that this thing will be ending up as a Category 4 hurricane. But the big question here with the intensity is, will this thing breach hurricane status? A lot of the models think that it probably won't, but there are a couple that say that it could teeter along with it and maybe even breach it as it gets further and further along towards the weekend. Now, if we take a look at the spaghetti model guidance, this basically tells us, out of multiple different runs, this tells us as to where the consensus is as to where this tropical system will most likely end up and making landfall. So The controlled here is this blue line, which ends up following along with the black line here, which is the mean of all the models. And this model guidance right here from the GEFS model, or the GFS model, is taking it to where it basically rides along Cuba and ends up heading off into the Gulf of Mexico, potentially even making landfall somewhere near Pensacola. Now, this is basically a very favorable track from most of the models. A lot of these models actually say that this most likely will happen. And if we take a look at another model that's pretty decent with predicting tropical cyclones, it's the Euro model as well. But the one thing that I do want to mention here with this model is that this actually takes it a lot closer towards the peninsula of Florida than the GFS. So really interesting to make a note of with this as we continue to get closer and closer. And even if we take a look at another model here, we're going to take a look at the HWRF model, which seemingly is really good at predicting rapidly intensification, but very bad for predicting small end storms, more or less. It's really good with track. I will say that. It is very good with tracking where tropical systems will actually end up and moving. So that is the good news for this with us. But we do have to take into account that some of the intensities most likely are not going to be as significant as it plays out to be. But if we take a look in the next few frames here, the next one heading off into Wednesday, the key thing is this thing does slice in between Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic and eventually heads off further and further. If I can try and move my computer here, and I won't. So that is not good. There we go. We got it. We got it. We fixed it there. And so as it heads off towards Wednesday evening into Thursday, you can see this thing actually stays well off to the north of Haiti and the Dominican Republic. And eventually, as this thing continues to go and move further and further along towards the north and west, you can see we're over towards the Bahamas and Cuba. This thing starts to rapidly intensify according to this model, which I did say that this thing does favor rapid intensification 9 times out of 10. And so this is just so happens to be one of the things where we have to keep this in the back of our heads as there could be the potential for this to happen. But as I said, very unlikely for this thing to go as high as Category 4 strength. So that is the good news for that, more or less according to the conditions out in the environment. But as this continues to progress further into Friday and Saturday, look at this. This thing gets closer and closer to Florida, and it actually takes it very close to Miami and Fort Lauderdale. So the people over there, just because most of the models say that this will head off to the Gulf of Mexico, does not mean that you need to disregard basically all sorts of knowledge off of this. I mean, even though Floridians I know are pretty tough out there, I still really think that you guys should monitor this system very, very closely. The potential for some widespread storm surge and upwards of 3 feet is possible, as well as the potential for some flash flooding across the board, some strong damaging winds. Can't exactly give you a very good estimate as to how high they could be. I do think that this tropical system, by the time it gets to the Keys, will most likely be a high-end tropical storm, which would be in upwards of 60 to 70 miles per hour. So just keep that in mind as that continues to move on through. That is a typical severe thunderstorm warning for people who are curious. So just one thing that I really wanted to get the point across is that this model right here, which is really good at tracking where tropical systems end up, does say that this most likely will head a bit further east than most of the models that say it will head off into the Gulf of Mexico, similar to Hurricane Elsa. So really interesting with that. One last thing that I do want to mention is that here is potential tropical cyclone 6. We have another disturbance in behind it, and this thing, according to most models, will actually end up becoming a tropical system, but it will be a lot later into next week, around the 16th and the 17th, and to the potential of when that could start to really form. And whether or not that will impact the U.S., how strong will that be? We'll have to figure out when potential tropical cyclone 6 or tropical storm Fred, which most likely will be a tropical storm here relatively soon, I'd say within the next 12 hours. Once that thing passes, then we'll begin to start looking at this development here and whether or not that will impact the United States. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy the video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, turn on notifications, share this with friends and family and on social media. As I said, not the best equipment that I'm running with here today, but I'm not exactly at home. So I'm just hoping that I get the information out as best as possible for you all. So thank you guys so much for giving me your time, and I hope you guys have a blessed day. Peace out, everyone.